Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today's July 7, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Adam Emmett. Adam, where in the heck are you calling in from?
I am calling in from beautiful upstate New York, specifically the town of Copake, which is in Columbia County. And that is near a point on the map where Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York all meet at a point, and I'm maybe 15 minutes away from that point.
How cool. The first question, Adam, is what is the best thing for a human being?
Well, happiness. I mean, it sort of becomes a reducto ad absurdum, but I mean, I think for a human being to be happy and in the process of making other people happy is the best thing. And maybe those two are one and the same. Yeah.
Let's go on. Yeah. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Definitely not when someone definitely not audio news. I would say reading. I think reading. Yeah. Not TV news, not audio news. I know you're not referring specifically to news. I can't handle podcasts.
Yeah. Well, you're doing pretty good so far. We're only
I literally thought I was on one.
Let's divert into reading for a second. Did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to read, two, as an example, or three, on your own?
Three on my own. Yeah.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, I think originally for practical reasons, to stay alive longer and pass on genes and such. And after that, I mean, a lot can be traced back to that. But I mean, I think after that, it's more or less a way of bonding with other people, social interaction. Obviously, this is a basic, interaction is a basic human need. And I think that being in contact with information is at root a way of being in contact with another person.
Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
I mean, I think we're born into a society that obviously has been evolving and developing for millennia, and we're born into a sea of information. And in some hypothetical where you were born into a forest with, let's say, a different kind of information available, would you innately gather that information? I mean, I think it's just sort of a something that's developed over time. I mean, I think if you ran the size of experiment of dropping some babies in the woods somewhere, I think they'd gather a certain amount of information. But I don't know. I forgot what the question was. Is it?
Well, that was fine. It was you evoked Truffaut's movie, The Wild Child. I mean, he's raised in a pack of wolves, blah, blah, blah. So do thoughts create emotions?
I would tend to put it the other way around. I think news and information can create emotions, but I think you end up thinking your feelings more than you end up feeling your thoughts.
Beautiful. Great word. You're a wordsmith. So, Adam, fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I...
have time to think about it.
Yeah, have the time to think about it, because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Right.
Can humans think without language?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I did a little bit of preparation for this, and I saw you ask that question. I'll just give one example, which is a Joyce-related example, which is Ulysses and Leopold Bloom and the Stream of Consciousness. a really valid point that I read somewhere is that's a wonderful literary representation of stream of consciousness, but what's going on in a person's head doesn't really resemble anything like what's going on in Leopold Bloom's head, or doesn't resemble those words, I should say. If you have the thought to yourself, I have to pick up the dry cleaning, the complete sentence, I have to pick up the dry cleaning, does not come to you in your mind. You envision the dry cleaners or whatever happens. It's not necessarily verbal. I think most of the time it's not verbal, at least for me. So
Yeah.
in that sense, you had the thought, you had to pick up the dry cleaning with no words involved.
Yep, that's good. In fact, Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down? What do you do?
What do I personally do?
Yeah.
What does one do? Say the same thing again with more exaggerated hand gestures. Yeah, no, physical contact, give somebody a hug. Yeah.
Good.
What I would do. Yeah.
Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think absolutely feeling. I mean, as I said before, I think emotions kind of precede language for the most part. And I mean, I'm all for thinking, but I think the driving forces in our world are much more emotional and kind of there's a substratum beneath language and beneath thought that is really what's driving everything.
Yeah. Two Alan Turing questions from the 50s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, if you believe that there's a soul, which in a way I do, I think kind of everything is a function of it. So yes.
Can machines think?
I don't think machines can think in the way that people can.
Yeah.
And, in the whole AI stuff that's going on these days, I mean, my question, and I'm interested and hope to kind of live to see some kind of answer to this. I think what could happen is we'll find out that there are certain things that machines can't do that AI cannot do. And that will, in fact, be a major discovery, because then we'll find out that there is something else in humanity, in the world, in the world of the mind and consciousness that is, it is not mechanistic, basically. And I don't know what that'll be, the soul or something that we don't know about yet. And interestingly, I think AI hitting a wall on what it can do is going to shed light on that sort of mystery element in the world.
Really well put. I agree with you. You touched on this. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I don't know what I'm pursuing.
That's the best answer I've had in a while.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think as one gets older, I mean, I think when I was younger, I was in pursuit of pleasure. And as I've gotten older and wiser, ultimately I'm in pursuit of happiness, but I've understood that this aiming for meaning is a better recipe for happiness than aiming for pleasure.
Yeah, that's good, because Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is where I got the question. He says meaning tends to last and happiness doesn't necessarily last.
Right. Yeah, I read Frankl. I actually lived in LA at the time when I was reading Frankl, and I loved it. It's one of the better books I've read, and the backstory there is, astonishing, and I recommend it. Yeah.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think this is not really directly answering the question, but there's a sort of Eckhart Tolle thing, which is to recognize that you are not the thoughts that you're having, that you can put a gap between the thoughts you're having and sort of observe the thoughts you're having as almost as a third party. And that third party that can observe the thing having the thoughts, the being having the thoughts, that third party sort of is a more fundamental level of consciousness. And so this is the mailman and the dog, by the way, what you hear.
No worries.
Yeah.
That was the third party arriving on cue.
Yeah.
Delivering the news. No, I love this. What you just taught me, the third party is more fundamental. And that's like the bumper sticker I love that says, don't believe everything you think.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that thing that can doubt what it's thinking or whatever is that the fundamental consciousness? Is that something the brain is creating or perceiving? I don't know. I don't know that it's all the brain. Back to what I think we might be finding out in decades to come.
Yeah, it's funny because, Adam, it's really me and you versus the wording on the questions. So I'm always open to rewording, and that question in particular, I could say, does the human more detect or create consciousness? Does the brain, does the mind, does the body? There's so many words I can put in there.
Right.
And anyways, it's somehow brain got in there, and that's the one that's
right. Yeah. Well, I tend to, and I just saw an article about this. I'm not going to go to the wall for this theory, but I like the idea that consciousness is a spectrum, and that not only is my dog conscious, but that trees are conscious, for example. In some way, and that seems a lot more elegant as a way for things to be, or just more plausible overall than the idea that it's some sort of new part of being alive that only kicks in if you reach human being level in the evolutionary tree, so to speak.
I love it because I want to be elegantly alive. I love that word. I want to be elegant. Yeah. So what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Well, speed of light. I mean, but I got a quote for you because I'm reading a lot of Shakespeare lately. And at one point in King Lear, they're out on the heath in the midst of the thunderstorm, and someone refers to thought executing fires. And I didn't know what thought executing fires was. I thought it meant lightning. And I got to look this up again, but it may refer to thoughts that happen as quickly as lightning or vice versa. I don't know. So after the fact, let's look up thought executing fires. But I mean, I'm saying a lot of I'm espousing a lot of sort of I don't know if it's new agey, but some non-materialistic stuff here. But at the same time, I want to say nothing's faster than the speed of light. I guess it's the Einstein fan in me coming through.
All good. So Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded, said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Well, I mean, I'm starting with deciding whether I agree with either of those statements. I definitely agree with the first one that, you can't, you have to get outside of a problem to solve it. A new tool that I suggest, I mean, if people were able to more clearly see themselves, if people were able to see the interconnectedness, their interconnectedness with everything else more clearly, which I'm very much in the category of needing to see it more clearly. I'm not saying I'm the master. That would be the tool that I suggested.
That is really good. To see more clearly interconnections. That is really good. And what new toy do you suggest?
I don't know. We have so many toys in this day and age. It's sort of what's left. What we have already. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I will tell you, my latest toy is I acquired a vintage 1950s jukebox that plays actual 45 RPM records. So that's my toy.
Oh, that is a cool toy.
Yeah.
Dude, I used to go on Pico in LA. My friend, her husband ran a jukebox business in LA.
Yeah.
And all she sold was 45s.
Yeah.
She had it so organized.
Yeah.
And I would just go in there and it was like heaven to me because I love the whole idea of 45s. What a cool.
Yeah. And you need to get, they need to have the center hole that's like yay big.
Yeah.
Not the center hole. Certain European 45s will have a center hole that's like yay big. And that can't play in a jukebox. And there's even a tool you can get on eBay called a record dinker. Cut out a hole, so you put it between this clamp and you dink the record to get make a jukebox ready. I don't have one of those yet, but that'll be the next toy that I want is a record dinker.
How cool. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
A lot. My kids, their emotional development. These answers are not so funny. The emotional development of my adolescent son. What else do I worry about? If I'm going to run out of money, those are probably the top two.
So you touched on this one, Adam, good in this third party Eckhart Tolle thing.
Yeah.
McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might be able to learn to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Adam, I asked you the question that Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, can you give me an example of what McLuhan had in mind when he made that statement?
Yeah. It's sort of like just take anything. I mean, I imagine with your kids' cell phone's an issue. We know what a cell phone can do, basically, the surface. But what's the environment it's created and what's its really hidden psychic effect? Mm-hmm. So we just have embraced Zoom. I mean, to me, Zoom is amazing in regards to Finnegan's Wake reading clubs. That's how we met, is that it is the ultimate tool to study the wake because it's people all over and you just got their face. So there's a hidden psychic effect, but we're like, oh, it's a tool. It's like everything we invent. We just get subsumed in how it helps us or how we can work with it. And we don't really know the TV caused the family or the radio caused the family to sit closer together and huddle around a campfire-ish kind of experience.
Right.
So it's sort of like that. It's sort of like you're saying the more fundamental level, the third party that you brought up earlier, it's sort of that same thing. So then we turn to the artists, whether it's musicians or filmmakers or painters or writers, and we go, oh, they're exposing these hidden psychic effects, maybe not even consciously.
Right.
We tend to ignore them.
Right. Well, I guess I would say that an artist is doing that around the clock, and a layman, a civilian, is doing that here and there throughout the day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, in other words,
well, the laymen are doing it too. I don't mean to sound elitist, like only the artists are doing this, because everybody's doing it. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
But some people go, no, we're not ignoring them, but it kind of seems we're ignoring them. So that's McLuhan thinks we're ignoring them. Why?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I just think most people don't. I mean, it's sort of a boring answer, but I mean, we don't really have time to stop and think about it. You know,
That's it.
like I got to get a cell phone, and I got to do this, and I got to do that, and you know, no one, you know, we do. It's happening too fast, and we're again interconnected, and I think our agency, anyone's actual free will and agency as they move through their life is probably vastly overestimated. You know, like it's just we're the victims of circumstance to some extent, and you know, and that's what happens. And you know, it all can be reduced to someone who was trying to build a better mousetrap, and now we have Zoom, and it's good and it's bad. And now I didn't have time to stop and think about it. You know,
it's the answer I get the most, Adam. So it's cool what you said. It's most people go, we don't have time. You know, we're too busy living life. It's sort of like, why did all the revolutionaries generally come from rich families? Because they got to read the books and tell the working class, you're being screwed. And the working class says, well, we're too busy working to figure out we're being screwed.
Right. I'm too tired. I'm too tired to foment a revolution. I've worked all day.
Well, do artists have moral obligation?
I mean, you know, I do think about this, and you know, I mean, you're not even asking about cancel culture, but just sort of like the hypothetically, can an immoral or amoral person generate great art? And that's not what you're asking, but I would say no. I mean, I would say the artist's obligation is to make great art, but I think that great art will generally be morally sound. Yeah. Like, in other words, if you know, if a terrible person wrote a great novel, whether intentionally or not, I think that novel would have moral truths in it that amounted to being morally, you know, positive, if that's the word. But it gets tricky when you get into abstract arts. I mean, you know, obviously there are a lot of terrible people who have written, you know, done various great artistic things. I don't think a truly quote unquote immoral work of art can be a great work of art, I guess. Yeah. But I don't think any artist should sit down and strive to, I don't think it's a good recipe to begin with moral aims. Yeah.
It's good. I love what you're saying, because most people go, yes, everybody has a moral obligation, blah, blah, blah. It's like, come on. That's what art is supposed to fuck your shit up, man. You know? Not only, but when it does, you know, it's just like.
Do you know Gesualdo? Do you know the Renaissance composer Gesualdo? Do you know that name?
I don't. Spell it.
Gesualdo.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Definitely. Yeah, so I mean, if you in the realm of music, you can say, well, Wagner, you know, is an anti-Semite, et cetera, et cetera. But Gesualdo was, I don't even, maybe 16th century, I'm not sure. He was a murderer, a psychopath, a sociopath, a murderer, a terrible person, who was also a great and very innovative, way ahead of his time Renaissance composer. So, you know, that is a person who has many facets. Yeah. Who one of those facets ultimately worked toward the benefit of humanity, which was this music he created. But you know, that's not quite the same question as what did he have?
But no, it's similar, because it's like, you know, G.G. Allin. Yeah, it's like, give me a break. His music sucks, and he sucks as a human being. But everybody's got to make documentaries about him and go, I know who G.G. Allin is, and you know, it's like icky. Anyways, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Well, I don't honestly feel that I'm afraid of either, but I'm more. I'm a more backward-looking person in general, in terms of I'm more interested in reading about ancient Sumeria than you know, the latest apps or whatever for iPad. But I don't tend to think there really are any new ideas, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, it's new wine in old bottles or something. I mean, you could find it in history, just applied to different stuff, but it's more or less variations on a theme, I would say, at this point in human civilization.
Yeah, really good, Adam. This is a lot of fun. Kid, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yeah. And of course, this is one of these, like, is this real or is this like, because I've thought about this exact question many times, but I lived in New Haven, Connecticut until I was 3. And then I moved to Stamford, Connecticut. So I have memories from New Haven and I know they're pre-3. And I remember standing at the top of the stairs and jumping around and pretending to be in the Beatles.
Oh, nice.
And that's more or less what I did from that point until the present moment.
That is good. And is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
A blessing. A blessing, yeah.
Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Well, I mean, I wish I had a less cheesy answer, but my mother is a big impact because my mother is a great person, a great human being. She's, MLK, Henry David Thoreau, Gandhi. She's got that kind of crazy wisdom. Crazy in the sense of like crazy high level.
Yeah. I know.
And I don't really know anyone who can match that, but she's certainly an influence in that way. And then outside my immediate family, who's a role model?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I got to go Jerry Garcia.
Nice.
Yeah. For, just putting out some example, a bad example in certain ways for sure, but an amazing example in many others of just going for it and attitudinally.
Yeah.
I just feel like he was an extremely attitudinally on point person in what he did throughout his life, which is why all the deadheads, of which I count myself one, are half as obsessed with Jerry's interviews as they are with his guitar solos.
It's really, really well put, because I was a deadhead before we were called deadheads. And my favorite is that 4-hour Dead movie where they go, all the guys in the Dead said, we got to sign this form that says you can't come to our town unless you have a ticket for a concert. And Jerry goes, I'm not going to do that. I started this band to have fun. I'm not going to to me, that was like, okay.
Right. Yeah. True. Yeah. There's a lot of sort of refusing to kind of take sides or take stances, which is not necessarily a good model to follow, but that was definitely his vibe. Yeah.
I loved it. Were you raised a particular religion?
Well, yes and no. Jewish to an extent, but only to a certain extent. Not heavily, but I'm in general, I'm more pro religion than many, because I think that the idea that religion is this, for a couple things. First of all, I think it's a lot more bottom up than top down, in the sense that I think religion arises from a basic human need and then gets institutionalized. And of course, a lot of bad things come out of that, even maybe before it's institutionalized. But, in the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union crumbled and people were free to practice religion again, the very first thing everybody started doing was reopening all the churches. This is coming from the people. It's not bad men at the top are imposing this on everyone. I think that, and I also think that why else am I pro-religion? I also just think that for a very long time, civilization just was religion.
Yeah.
And culture was religion, and the idea that we can kind of get rid of religion and maintain everything else is we are facing problems in that. That being said, I profess no faith, and I don't go to church or anywhere, and so but I'm less opposed than many. And also, if you listen to any gospel music, it's hard to be totally against religion.
Dude, I'm there. Do you pray?
Once in a while. Do you know the Door song? What Door song is it that Jim Morrison just screams out, "You can't petition the Lord with prayer"?
I don't know the name.
It's just at some point in the middle of, maybe it's in like the end or something. Epic. He just starts screaming, "You cannot petition the Lord with prayer." Once in a while, I'm almost sort of like cracking a joke to myself in my own mind. But once in a while, I will petition the Lord with prayer.
Yeah.
And for example, at my daughter's dance performance, I petitioned the Lord that she wouldn't fall during the performance.
She
did it. Yeah.
That's the great joke.
Yeah.
Paul Krasner, the little kid's up to bat in Little League, and he goes, "Please, God, let me hit a home run." And the pitcher goes, "Please, God, let me strike him out." The clouds part, and God's voice goes, "You superstitious fools."
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah. But, and then, I mean, on a more serious level, I might try to think happy thoughts now and then as a way to bolster my mood. And that's kind of prayer.
But Adam, if God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Geez. I don't know. Everything happened as it should, did all the things you were supposed to do. I think it's going to be okay.
Right.
No.
That's good.
Yeah.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Well, I'm going to say sort of none of the above. I'm going to say that evil tendencies, which are, you could say, really just unconscious tendencies, are present in everyone.
Yeah.
To some degree. And when those, get too much momentum, then you have mass evil. But I don't think it's an exterior force. I mean, I don't think it's Satan. I think it's everyone. Even Hitler, I think, had some good in him.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to go to bat for Hitler here, so to speak, but, I guarantee if you read his biography, there were moments where he was really nice to a little kid. So it's just a matter of balance.
It helps me that so many people say we're all capable of doing evil, or have that tendency to do something. But the real hidden question, Adam, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? I'm going to set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from The Mob and the Samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I like Alan Watts. I'm an Alan Watts fan. I wouldn't put that idea into practice in my day-to-day life. I'm more of the killing them with kindness school of thought, or catching flies with honey and not with vinegar. I think if you're unfailingly, I mean, this obviously can only get you so far, but if you're unfailingly polite and sort of humane and kind with people, you can defuse people who are wired to not be those things to you. But that's not the same as how are we going to beat the Nazis in World War II,
Yeah.
And for that level of dealing with an enemy, I don't know that any of the quotes apply. But yeah, I mean, more or less in the Christian school of thought of loving the enemy, turning the other cheek, that sort of thing.
Yeah. No, it sounds like your mom was a great person. Gandhi, Thoreau, and MLK. But, Nassim Taleb said games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Then someone said, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. Gregory Bateson said, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, I did something socially and morally wrong? It's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
I mean, I think yes. I think sometimes it does, or the fear of punishment. But I think it's one of many devices that are in place to attempt to regulate society, or parents attempting to regulate children or whatever. I mean, I don't punish my kids, but. Yeah, I mean, I think it works. I mean, to some extent. I mean, I think if you're afraid that you're going to go to jail for 40 years for doing X, you're less likely to do X, but that doesn't make it the best remedy, or certainly not the only remedy. But I mean, it's not the grooviest position, but if I were designing a legal system, I think there would be jails, I mean, yeah. I think the reason we've never had a jail-free society is not because we've been insufficiently groovy. I mean, I think it's sort of required in the same way we also need, a lot of other seemingly objectionable things. I don't know. I'm saying some stuff here that's coming off more reactionary than what I actually believe. But I certainly think the fear of punishment works, but I think that and ultimately, I don't know. I'm at a loss there.
That's the whole thing is, you don't have to answer the question. It's just prompts to air ideas. Yeah. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Mm-hmm. Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, I mean, I think that an artistic representation of something, and I mean, film, obviously the film of the tree is not exactly the same thing as the tree, and any kind of representation of something has insights in it that are not equivalent to the original thing, and it's in those insights that, that's why you get something out of it. And, speaking of Joyce in Dubliners, I mean, Dubliners, I think, was a really helpful book for me. To me, Dubliners is almost a self-help book, because the incredibly insightful and perceptive and vivid depictions of all these people with these different personality types and sort of temperaments or different kinds of. I'm thinking in particular of this story. I think it's called A Little Cloud, maybe, where there's this guy who's a very kind of meek, humble, sort of kind of a schlumpy guy who like goes to a bar and he meets this other guy who's really cool and has been to London. And the main character has never left Dublin, but this other guy's been to London and he's been living the high life in London. Anyway, the depictions of those characters and how the schlumpy guy is inwardly sort of placing himself beneath the other guy.
Yeah.
Seeing that psychology described so vividly really helped me to notice when I might be doing something similar myself.
Yeah.
And so that kind of thing. So in short, the vivid depiction of things or representation of things helps us to see them in a new way. And I don't think art has ever been about, mirror images or, even photorealistic painting is obviously a form of art and isn't reality.
Yeah. Really good, Adam. I appreciate that. And then tell us your tipping points just briefly on you sort of already described it. At 3, you're jumping around acting like the Beatles. Your tipping point to say, I want to be a writer, and a musician, write about music and play it.
Yeah.
Where you see this stuff or you hear it and you go, that's my calling. That's what I want to pursue. And then to become an educator, your two main things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I mentioned earlier that I don't know what I say. I didn't know what I'm pursuing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always, have done various things. It took me a long time for me to figure out the best way for me to participate in the world of music. And I ultimately figured that out when I did a music blog where I was basically digging up, obscurities. A lot of them were on vinyl, but the point was not so much that they're on vinyl as much as you can't find them anywhere except on vinyl. Digging up obscurities that either no one ever knew about or certainly everyone has forgotten about, and finding some things that were really, really good and putting those on the internet and sharing them. And I found that was a way that I could really get myself off, for lack of a better word, the world of music, almost more than I ever did playing an instrument. So whatever you want to call that, that's what I found to be my calling. And, one interesting thing if there was a lesson I learned from all of that, and there is, this came up before when you were talking about, oh boy, just the idea that it's sort of, the artist, the emanations of the technology, and the artist has to notice them. What was the quote again from McLuhan?
Hidden psychic effects of the inventions. The artists are broadcasting them. Yeah.
Yeah. When you began that quote, I thought you were going in a sort of different direction. But what I thought you were talking about was the idea that there's sort of ambient, whatever in the ether, and the artist, puts his finger up and kind of is a lightning rod, and
that's what the beginning is, the antenna of the rays.
There it is.
That's what Dylan says. He's just a radio receptor, and he's
right.
Just
right. And it's a cliche at this point, but I think anyone who's doing art has to work and struggle, and it doesn't always feel like they're just receiving manna from heaven. But at the same time, I think anyone who really gets into it has moments where they feel that something's coming through them. And one thing I picked up on doing this music blog is there are songs out there that basically no one's ever heard that are as good, that could be on the White Album, that are like, they could be like a good song on the White Album.
Oh yeah.
And the difference is this one guy or gal didn't do that 500 times. They did it once, basically. So it's almost like a matter of frequency. Anyway, but so that was something that I learned in that experience, which is not really answering your question, but that's what
you answered it fine. Dude, you answered it great when you said to get myself off. That is really kind of language that communicates to me. I think that's why I appreciate what you say at the wake meetings, because you're talking my kind of language.
Yeah. It's
music lingo and mixed with Joyce and mixed with
it's slightly post 60s, ex-hippie lingo. But and then, this isn't terribly groovy, but then it just so happens that my aforementioned adolescent son has oodles more musical talent than I ever did.
Yeah.
So now my participation in music is, now I'm Leopold Mozart or whatever his name is. I'm training my offspring and grooming them for great things.
Good.
So
that's, where did this tipping point to be an educator? Where was this?
Oh, that's practical. That's just needing it. But that's what the universe has, sort of told me that I'm in demand for. Let's put it that way.
No, that's good.
So I've done a hell of a lot of educating of primarily high school kids.
Yeah.
And in fact, I had 4-hour-long Zoom tutoring meetings already today.
Yeah.
And so this is my 5th Zoom of the day, if you will, and of a different stripe. But yeah, and one of my students this morning was in Cyprus.
Wow.
Yeah, she's summering in Cyprus. They're 7 hours ahead. She says she speaks Greek and she speaks the Cypriot dialect of Greek. So I'm impressed. This is a New York City kid, but
yeah,
she's in Cyprus with her family.
Oh, right. So a screenwriting teacher told me a great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great film, great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process? Say when you're writing your music blog.
Yeah, I think intention is always, I think people have intentions and then what happens is always different from the intentions. So I mean, no really great art, I would argue, has ever been made by someone sitting down with a vision of what they were going to do and ending up with exactly what they thought they were going to do. Right. I mean, it's, you know, like a lot of true things, it's a bit of a cliche, but I mean, I think everyone, you know, you find out as you're doing it that it becomes something else. And, you know, I mean, it's obviously a personal thing, but the original intention is almost just a sort of reason to begin, and then where you land could be somewhere entirely different.
Yeah. And Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing your music blog?
Well, I mean, in anything that I do, you know, I guess my feeling about that is that I work under the assumption in any creative thing that I do that if I'm getting myself off, it's maybe not the most pleasant way to describe it, but if I'm doing that, then someone else is going to get something out of it. And so what was the original question? Do you consider your audience?
Yeah, are you thinking of your reader when you're writing?
Right. Well, this is, I mean, in writing, this is an ongoing debate. Do you have to be considerate to the reader or not? You know, I lean more in the direction of assuming that if the creator is doing something that pleases themselves, it will have an effect, and you might have to work a little harder to figure it out if the creator was not having their audience in mind when they made whatever they made. But you know, the whole idea of soul transfigured and soul transfiguring, that's a Joyce quote. If the soul was transfigured while the thing was being created, the thing created will have the effect of being soul transfiguring. It will transfigure other souls. I tend to believe that. And I don't know that it's one-to-one. It's possible that someone was having a shitty day and recorded a saxophone solo and felt nothing while they recorded it. And I'm listening to it and it's the greatest thing I've ever heard. Yeah. That's possible. But I tend, and I suppose the alternative is true. Someone could, you know, some kind of, you know, mentally ill person, you know, in the subway could be blowing a horn and, you know, blowing on a trombone and thinking it was the best thing they'd ever heard. And to me, it's noise that I want out of my life. But in general, I think there's a correspondence there. And, you know, Finnegan's Wake, I think about this all the time, is really what happens when the reader, I mean, this is one angle on it, but you could say it's what happens when the reader is completely disregarded. If a person says, I'm going to do 600 pages of things that make sense to me and could be private jokes, could be in jokes, are sort of my own private language. And I'm speaking in the mind of Joyce here. These are, you know, I get what this means. This is funny to me. I understand this pun. I understand this reference. And I am going to do zero to help the reader get that. I'm there's, in other words, there's no exposition, there's no explanation, there's almost no, it's like, let's see what we can do if we can take that completely out of the equation. You know, you might end up with Finnegan's Wake. So, which I, of course, am a fan of. So, in short, I think that you do your audience the best possible service sometimes by not trying to cater to the audience.
Yeah. Brilliant, Adam. You have ESP because you anticipated the next questions and so well. And I was raised sort of, the Wake has no content. And, you can't tell, like the other groups I go to, I'd love you to attend the Austin group. They're really great people. And some of them cross over into New York. And one of them, Sherry, after a year or two of the Wake during COVID with her, she goes, aren't you going to tell us there's no content in the Wake, Jerry? Like, she wanted to hear that, but she's like, well, Blake, and it's amazing how New York gets through a third of a page. I mean, the Venice and Austin, we get through a page in 2 hours. New York is Wake. That's in Dublin. Sweeney's is the opposite. We just read for an hour and then sort of casually gab for a half hour.
Right.
And none of this breakdown. And, that's those two questions I wanted to ask you. If you already answered the second, but what was Joyce's intention? Your guess or your hunch, what was Joyce's intention in writing the Wake, and how much was he thinking of his audience?
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, to go to this again, I think he was trying to get himself off. I think that was the driving thing. And I tried to bring this up in one of the meetings, and I didn't say it very well. And I tried to figure out what I meant by it. And I was saying Joyce wasn't a modernist, and that he didn't care about modernism. And I got pushback on that, and I thought about it after the fact, and I tried to figure out what I was trying to say. And I think what I was trying to say was that I don't think that he was driven particularly by wanting to do something that had never been done before. I mean, that might sound like a ridiculous take, but I think it was more or less, he was trying to amuse himself with language as a writer. And for whatever reasons, having written Ulysses, the next thing that he found amusing turned out to be Finnegan's Wake. And I don't think that sort of making a grand artistic statement and sort of laying down the gauntlet for this is now the high watermark of modernism, that I dare you to out-modern me. I don't think it was that. So, but it's an intention. Art is an intention to communicate, of course. And I think everyone, consciously or not, who makes art has that intention. And despite what I was saying about ignoring the reader, and I think Joyce was trying to communicate and had readers in mind. But I think it's almost an experiment in what's going to happen if I don't help the reader in any way with what I'm creating.
Yeah. It's like then that you get Ellman and all these people says, well, he said in this letter and blah blah blah, and it's like, so what? He could have just been saying that bullshit to fake everybody out, because Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. And everybody goes, oh, that's right. And then one guy goes, that's bullshit, because if I'm going to seek something, that's because I want to find it. So the cliche is the journey's more important than the destination. Why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey's more important?
Well, it's a little bit like, if you have an intention and you begin a project and you end up somewhere completely different, the intention functioned as a catalyst to begin. And likewise, having a destination is a catalyst to begin a journey. I mean, I think the journey is more important than the destination. I think there's a lot of truth to that. But I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to turn this into a more concrete idea so I can say something hopefully interesting about it. I mean, people do things for reasons, right? I mean, I think I believe in the whole journey as a destination thing, but I mean that has to happen in the context of actually doing things. And I think there's just different sides of looking, different ways of looking at life: the purely practical side, the purely ethereal, spiritual side, and everyone's got all those things happening all at once. And I don't know. Put it this way: I don't know what pure journey looks like. You know, who is the individual in history that we can point out and say this person was pure journey with no destination?
Yeah.
I'm genuinely asking. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, pure journey, like the rock group. So it's pure journey.
The Greatest Hits album.
Yeah. But it is, you know, the flaneurs or psychogeography is the people who sat in Paris in the 20s and changed the world forever because they didn't do anything but slack and drink coffee.
Right,
you know?
right.
But there was one other thing you evoked that I never bring up, and you know, studying the Watts Towers in LA, one guy spent 30 years making the most incredible piece of art ever on the face of the earth. And then he goes, okay, I'm out of here. Bye. You know, and it's like the Wake, because people go, well, he was a folk artist because he just kept adding. So people could say, well, Joyce is just a folk artist. He just keeps adding. And you use the word vision. And these other highbrow art people said, no, Simon Rodeo was a visionary artist. He wasn't a folk artist. Folk artists are like driven and they just keep doing, you know, like Henry Darger or these crazed artists, then outsider artists. But Joyce and Simon were visionary artists. They had a vision and they went for it. But it doesn't mean that was just, you know, with the, you know, what do you call those things you put on the horse? You know,
the binders.
Yeah. You know, it was peripheral vision and they were open. But, right. You know, I want to know your history with Joyce because you seem to know Joyce well. I mean, I got into Joyce through the Wake, and I've really never studied the entire, but in studying the Wake for 30 years, you can't not learn about other, but it seems, Joe, but before we do that, I have to ask you the stupid grand question about the Wake. How much percentage do you think you get the Wake, and how much percentage do you think Joyce got the Wake? Like 0 to 100%. I know it's stupid, but just your guess.
Okay. I think I'm getting it maybe 60%.
Good. That's good. I appreciate you being,
or maybe 51. And
how much did Joyce get it?
I think do you want a number? And then I'll say he thought he was getting 90.
Yeah, good.
I don't think Joyce thought that he was intended to. I mean, by the way, a lot of things arguably don't matter. The artist's intention arguably doesn't matter. Anything the artist ever thought arguably doesn't matter. But if you don't get too theoretical about it, I think everyone naturally thinks about these things. So I'm not going to become postmodern and say that they're irrelevant or something. But I don't think that Joyce intended to make something that could mean anything to anyone and was just a sort of experiment in epistemology or something. Yeah. I think he was trying to write a book that people could read. And I actually get sort of inwardly in those Wake meetings, I have this feeling like Finnegan's Wake shouldn't be a research project. I don't think the authorial intent was to create a really big research project for everybody. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. The research is interesting and it's inescapable. If you sit down to analyze a page, you're going to end up doing some research. Yeah. But I don't think the idea is this is a homework assignment, you know, and get some books out of the library and start to figure it out. I think it should be enjoyable as a freestanding art object with zero outside information, but in reality, you end up doing the research.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I did it running the Finnegan's Wake for 3 decades now. I mean, it's like a big research part. But I approach it more like we could be reading a page from People magazine, and
Right.
it doesn't matter what we're reading. It's who's attending and what they're saying.
Right.
So and that's what books, like, they go, you're a reading club? Well, what book are you working on? One book. When are you going to be done? Never. They think it's not a normal reading club. It's like a hootenanny.
Right.
And it's like, the important thing is that he sort of required you read it out loud with a group of people.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's not now psychoanalyze it. No, but it's fun. And whatever, however people, I mean, usually in Austin, we go through three things. We start analyzing it. Then we start trying to figure out, why did Joyce do this? Then we get into the poo-poo caca, and it's all these high intellectuals talking poo-poo caca. And it's like, wait a minute. It's like this slippery slope. You're going all over the place.
Yeah.
But your history of Joyce, Adam, I'm curious, starting in what, high school or college? And then how did you get to the wake? Like, it seems as though you know all of Joyce pretty well, or a lot of it. What's your history, required or then on your own, or what?
Yeah, no, in college, I think I took a course on 20th century British literature, and I think I read both Dubliners and Ulysses in that course, and I loved them both. And I'm a super fan. Aforementioned top of the stairs, wanting to be in the Beatles. I'm the kind of person who wants to know what Paul McCartney was having for breakfast in 1965. I am a total super fan, and I have heroes. Back to like, does art, is that a way to become a hero? Well, yeah, I vicariously feel heroic through art all the time. So in short, having read Ulysses and Dubliners and loved them both, I then read Ellman's biography, the aforementioned Richard Ellman. I read his biography of Joyce, which was totally fascinating to me. And a lot of it is like, where does this come from? Because it's not like, meaning where does the mental world of James Joyce come from? Because it's not like everyone growing up in Dublin in the late 19th century was thinking about medieval Irish history, for example. I mean, it's sort of there in the culture and sort of not. So the confluence of high and low, among other things, in Joyce's worldview were interesting to me. But anyway, Ellman's biography, every chapter heading is a quote from Finnegan's Wake. I don't know if you remember that, but and he'll take little snippets that seem to be, allusions to Joyce's life. There's this one that's like, Trieste, Trieste, I ate my liver. And that's the chapter that's on Joyce's time in Trieste. So those quotes piqued my interest, and then I got into Finnegan's Wake, and, it's one of those.
But did you go into the Wake through college classes, or you started reading it with a group of people out loud, or you were reading it to yourself quietly?
The latter, reading it to myself quietly. But then audiobooks were a big revelation. Was some, I think it's on the Naxos label. It was 4 cassettes. This is actually also when I lived in LA, driving around listening to these 4 cassettes, which lean very heavily on book 1 of The Wake. And I want to say the person reading it is named Jim Norton. And that is fantastic. And that was like, oh yeah, right. If you read it out loud, if you read it as something, you read these sentences as if they were normal English sentences, you start to understand it. And so, yeah, that was a big turning point. And as I said, I've really only been doing this online Wake group for less than a year. And I popped in a couple times to that group in person in the early 2000s. So I have not really done very much of that. But audiobooks are transformative and for the Wake. And I also think that you should approach the Wake not as this is a very difficult riddle that you will never solve, but as if this is, you're meant to understand this. It's not an opponent. It's not something you're trying to defeat. It's welcoming you in, and if you should receive it as something that you're meant to enjoy, just as you do anything else. And I think it's approached in that spirit, it's much better.
Yeah. It's like tripping on acid. I mean, basically, it's a hallucinogenic. At points when you're reading it out loud with a group of people and there's none of that clutter of figuring it out, it's literally an amazing experience, and you can lose sense of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll jump back into Joyce. I'm curious, a couple other things. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. So then knife and fork extend our teeth. The shutter in a camera or projector extends our eyelid. Even maybe non-tangible like religion or philosophy extends consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? What humanness or human sensorium? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what does the writing utensil extend for you?
I mean, I don't have a better answer than the brain off the top of my head. I mean, whatever. I mean, the kind of writing that I do is things that I find amusing that become more amusing when they're sort of developed or put into some definite form. And so that is a way to have fun that begins in the brain and then gets outside the brain, because you're kind of building an apparatus that you can't build entirely in your head unless you write it down. Now, there are people out there who can write a whole book in their head and just know it, and if they don't need to put it down. You know, but I'm not one of those people. So whatever inward game is being played in my own mind is the thing that would be extended by the writing utensil.
Our poet says poetry is outing our inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
English.
No, what metaphorically, what form is your inner consciousness in?
Give me some. Can this be multiple choice? Give me an example of an answer.
No, I'll tell you my favorite answers. An experimental filmmaker in New York, Abigail Child. What form is your inner dialogue in? She goes, I wish I knew.
Yeah.
You know, people say like TV commercials or my mother's voice or, images, it's sort of like, that's the amazing thing is what language is Joyce's inner dialogue in?
Right.
It is the wake. I mean, but it's not the ink on the paper. It's people mispronunciating the words. Mm-hmm. I mean, the thing about Finnegan's Wake is you're watching how bad readers are and how good they are. Like I grew up in front of a TV set. I'm an idiot. I can't read. And I'm reading The Wake and I literally go, I just mumbled some of these syllables, and some of these readers do every syllable perfect,
Right.
And it's so wrong. Michael Silverblatt said it best, the bookworm guy. He said, what do you think of The Wake? He goes, there's a typo in every word on purpose.
Yeah, right.
But here, let's go on. Adam, here's the Michael Apted, the filmmaker. I says, why do rack video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922 in France, but in the 80s, it flourished because of MTV. And so he said, because we've learned to take in information faster. Marty Scorsese says, I'm editing my films faster because of MTV. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Again, not the grooviest answer, but I think there's probably a scientific limit to, it's however many frames per second you stop being able to distinguish, and you see it as a constant image. You don't see individual frames. So I think there's a limit to that. And I know you're encouraging, like, I can take it off in a different direction. So I'll answer a slightly different question and bring up a slightly different point, which is is there anything to the idea that the technology that facilitates creation, weirdly, like you would tend to end up with something better when it was harder to do, and editing would be here's what I mean. Editing would be a perfect example of, or the special effects in 2001, right, still look better than the special effects in whatever's being made right now. Not that I'm gonna get into like it was all better back in the day, but somehow the harder it was to do it, weirdly, it somehow turns out better. Film versus digital video, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I don't want to take that idea too far, but I think that, let's just say it's, again, not quite the question you were asking. I do think that something is lost when it becomes too easy to do something too quickly. I think a lot is lost.
I totally agree, because that's why Kubrick said he made the 2001 to convolute McLuhan's medium as the message. He made it to twist McLuhan. And so, that's a great example that he, the Wake invented 2001 Stargate sequence and HAL and everything and disguised it as a book. I mean, this is my big line, is any new technology, whatever's after the internet, whatever's after chat box, Joyce already invented it and disguised it as a book. So that's like, he used that bare bones tool. I like what you just said, but what do you well, the real hidden question was, is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
I mean, yeah. But, and this is, you can read 1,000 boring op-eds on this, but I do think we've lost a lot in the extent to which our attention is divided. And I remember being in Amsterdam on my honeymoon. It was 2008, and we were in this little shop, and we bought this like really small, like a miniature table and chairs, like a table that was like yay high, and these 4 little chairs that someone had just made out of like wire and fabric. And we were like, what is this thing? Like, why is this here? And the guy in the store is like, well, I don't know. I think it was just someone in a very long Scandinavian winter just sat there and made this thing. So, I mean, if I look at the, a lot of the art that I love as it's been created through the ages, a lot of it is the result of someone with not much to do who had to find a way to amuse themselves and fill the time. And the more of that time that needed to be filled and the less other things there were available to fill that time, more or less, the more incredible the end result. I mean, it's not one-to-one, it's not proportional, but if there's a way moving forward for the human race to get back to the equivalent of being trapped in a room with a piano for 3 years and like what happens when you walk out of that room, I think that would be helpful.
No, it's good examples. Digital editing compared on flatbeds. You had to wait for the reels to rewind so you could think. Now there's no think time.
Right.
That's why they have 5 editors editing.
Right.
So what was the motive of the cave artist?
I mean, I think it's kind of a magic trick. I think the first art probably was representational. And I think if you draw an alpaca or whatever, or a what's that? An ibex or what have you. It's just like, I can do something here that I can, play God more or less, or create an ibex that is there, but it's not really there. But I also think, do you know Julian Jaynes' Origins of Consciousness in the Bicameral Mind or whatever?
It's huge. It's huge in the McLuhan world, of course. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, I read it. I can't say that I got a tremendous amount out of it, but the basic notion that human beings were not quite conscious in the way that we are, not just in caveman times, but up through maybe even sort of into the modern era to some extent. I like that idea. I can't think of the rulers of ancient Egypt of being conscious in quite the same way that we are in being able to weigh their decisions. I think it was sort of happening, again, lack of free will. I think it was happening a little bit more kind of unconsciously than it does for us. And that is in turn a function of how much information can you access, how available to you is history or the thoughts of others. And it's so available to us that we can consider our actions in relation to those of other people in a way that wasn't possible. So in short, I don't think cave people doing their paintings were conscious of what they were doing in any way that we would call conscious.
Yeah, that's McLuhan's favorite line. One of McLuhan's favorite lines is, "The Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can."
Exactly.
Right. And then what else you evoked was, women can transfer the left and right brain tendencies better through the corpus callosum. Men are sort of like left linear leaning, but Rain Man, there was no corpus callosum. They were fused.
Okay.
So he didn't have that play, so he could memorize the phone book, but he couldn't tie his shoe.
Right. Well, that kind of stuff is incredible that, it just shows you the range of human possibility. And, we definitely have to have, if not blinders, we have to have a certain amount of tunnel vision to survive. And if you open it up too wide, it would be overwhelming and, you couldn't get out of bed.
That's what the word I was looking for earlier, tunnel vision. Very good.
Yeah.
Adam, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
Well, I think there's a peace with honor is a notorious phrase. I think it's from Neville Chamberlain on the eve of World War II. He was hoping to strike a deal with Hitler and reach peace with honor. I think, is that what that's from? No. Maybe I'm quoting Nixon on Vietnam. Nixon saying we have to achieve peace with honor. We have to get out of Vietnam, with holding our heads up without looking like fools. So I would say compromise with conviction is the ideal.
Dude, that was great. Because the great thing is I can go to one of my favorite websites, Quote Investigator. And so they're like etymology. They try to trace where it came from. Because in etymology, my favorite line is of unknown origin. It's like every word is of unknown origin. Some guy just says, well, we think it came from this. So
Right.
So you already covered this, but I want to get to it a little. Two of my film heroes their mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mika says there's no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, environments, and cultures are dominant?
Well, I would say the latter. And I think, this is sort of a corollary to the idea of interconnectedness. And I think everyone tends to overrate the extent to which they actually have free will and agency as they make their way through their lives. I think we're much more the victim of circumstances or hero of circumstances than we realize. If you sit down to write a song on the piano, you're dealing with not only the fact that the piano was invented, there's the what you as an individual human being are going to bring to that is the tiniest little fraction of a piece of the iceberg at the very tip.
Yeah.
The organization of tones into 12 per octave, the construction of this instrument, every song that's ever been written before that you've heard, all of that vastly outweighs anything that you're going to do, plus all the people you're in contact with from day to day, everyone you've ever spoken to in your entire life, all the things that are going on around you. So the idea of yourself as a sort of disconnected free agent, I think is way off base. So it's much more, just kind of something coming through. And self-expression, I mean, I would just put it as, you're opening yourself to the possibility of something expressing it. I mean, it's, expressing yourself through you. It sounds whatever, but you're more or less falling in line with a universal force that wants to make something happen. I tend to,
Can art making be egoless?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people kind of forget where they are. I mean, I think these things are sometimes not helpful because the aspiring artist, these sorts of ideas, because the aspiring artist is like, well, gee, what's wrong with me? Like when I wrote my poem, I never felt like I left my body and I went to the top of Mount Olympus. So what's wrong with me? Why am I not a real poet? Because I didn't feel that way. So I hesitate to say that kind of thing. But at the same time, it's hard to imagine that. I mean, people absolutely exit their bodies in the process of making art and their minds, and in that sense, it's becoming egoless.
Yeah. Adam, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. You know what? 80% of people say, can art be egoless? And they go, no. And this woman a year ago says, great art is egoless. And this woman a month ago says, it has to be egoless. Right. But it's all depending on what you mean by ego. Because one guy said, do you mean the word ego as bad? It's a... the iceberg thing was really important because that's sort of like what these guys, George Lakoff says, we're operating like 80% unconscious or subconscious, like below, and there's only 20% happening up top. And so, we want to think, hey, I mean, we've been talking for a long time here, and I think we've both been conscious. but is perception reality?
No, hard no. And my dog's perceiving something quite different from what I'm perceiving, and you're perceiving something different from what I'm perceiving, and I think what's left, a big part of the puzzle of understanding the world we're in, that human beings have, ahead of them is distinguishing between, perception and reality. And it's, that's about,
Adam, I asked for 90 minutes. I know you've done a lot of Zooms today. Do you want to end in 8 minutes, or do you want to keep going and maybe schedule a part 2 some other time, 2 or 3 months down the road, or you want to just keep going now?
It's really up to you. What? Go
ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, let's end in 8 minutes and do a part 2 at some point.
Let's do that. That'd be good, because I'd love to do music with you, a delve into music. So just some of these others. Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I think I've said a number of things, impossible things so far in this meeting. I don't know how many of them I believed.
That's the key word. That's really key how Lewis worded that. Believe, because the word believe has the word lie in the middle of it.
Right. Well, I mean, if I truly believe it, then I don't think it's impossible. But yes, I believe in things that many would consider impossible, and including the aforementioned theory that the development of AI, which is a bit of a snooze as a topic because it's too much in the news, but here we go. The development of AI will hit a wall, revealing there to be some non-mechanistic element in reality that has heretofore not been discovered or understood. And I don't know if this is going to happen in some kind of big transformative way in my lifetime. But I think it's out there as a another way to say it is whenever a question is asked that we don't have a real answer to, like what happened before the Big Bang, or what we're really revealing there is that we're totally limited in what we can perceive and in our consciousness. And basically what you just said is, I guess we don't have the ability to comprehend it all in the same way that my dog doesn't have the ability to comprehend it all. And we're just sort of, when you ask those sorts of questions, you're just sort of highlighting that. So if believing things beyond that equals believing impossible, then that would be my answer.
It's really good. Sunra said, in the New Yorker of all things, the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
Yeah.
But your Big Bang thing is beautiful. At the end of Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart's lives, they were talking to each other on the phone. And they both had watched a PBS documentary on the Big Bang. And Frank asked Don, what do you think came before the Big Bang? And Don went, the big.
That's a good answer, yeah. Or yeah.
Like we think we can answer it. That's funny.
Right. Well, so that's why Finnegan's Wake ends with the word "the," of course.
Oh, it's amazing. And talk about obscure artists, because I really love to go into that obscure artist in the music world with you. I know Elliot Ingberg. He was on the cover of Freak Out, and then he had a band called Fraternity of Man, and they had a song called "Don't Bogart That Joint, My Friend."
Okay, I know the song. Yeah.
And Elliot's an amazing guy. He played with Beefheart, and he blew Jimi Hendrix off the planet playing. He's like he's the greatest white Jewish blues player ever in the rock era.
Okay.
And he had a song or an album called The. It was 5 thes. The.
It's almost iambic pentameter.
Okay, a couple more and then we're out of here, and I look forward to part 2. Thank you, Adam. This has been super. Yeah. What question remains unresolved for you?
Well, I mean, I think I'm still working on my life narrative, and I'm trying to get to the point where I can look back on it and consider it a win. And I think the unresolved question is, to what extent will I be able, and of course I could get hit by a truck 5 minutes after this interview.
Yeah.
If that doesn't happen, one big question is, can I get to the end and get to a point where I can look back at it and consider it a win? I mean, I already do, but I'm quite what my perspective will be when I get to that point. And there's less sort of self-involved ways to look at that question, but something along those lines is one unresolved question.
I like that. Really well put. In Hollis Frampton, the experimental filmmaker, said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
Repeat that whole question to me one more time.
Well, the question is basically, can you forget to die?
I think that I'm more in the camp of constant awareness of death is important.
Yeah.
And everything, we're beings toward death, constantly being aware of the worms and the grave is a positive thing and is super important. And I'm more in that school of thought that says that the cultures that put death off to the side and don't look it in the face are really doing everyone a disservice.
Yeah.
So but forgetting to die, I'm not totally sure what to do with that phrase. But I think if you forget to die, you're going to remember.
Yeah. Well, it's Joyce says, remember to forget. And the thing is it's one of my most difficult questions, how people handle it, because they're not sure if I'm being metaphorical or literal. Can you forget to die? Well, you put it in the context you want.
Right.
So just, it's a sort of freaky question, because it is the wake in so many ways.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, just back to the whole idea of coincidence of opposites, and that's a big Finnegan's Wake thing, of course. But, on some level, the constant awareness of death that I alluded to equals, total lack of fear of death or lack of concern about death.
That's it. Yeah, it's both. Yeah. So it was both. It's the big picture. It's comprehensive awareness. It's like Pascal. It's understanding that in order to understand anything, you have to know this end of the spectrum and that, and everything in between. Which is hard. But last question is how has Joyce, let's say specifically Finnegan's Wake, but you could say Joyce, shaped your behavior? How has your delve into Joyce shaped your behavior?
Well, I would say, I don't know if it's quite behavior, but I mean, the aforementioned thing with Dubliners and that story, A Little Cloud, and the awareness of when a person, well, just the extent to which a person is bringing his own kind of mindset to every situation and sort of positioning himself in relation to other people, either above or below, that as a ridiculous thing to be doing, which, I'm trying to get over it, but I still do from time to time. Oh, this person's better than me, I'm better than that person. That's horseshit, right? And so just being able to see that so clearly that when you're doing it, and that it's a ridiculous thing to be doing, that would be one. But also, Ulysses illustrates that every moment, and you're standing, you're waiting to cross the street. The amount of ambient information around you, and like the fact that the name on the street sign is some Dutch person, Mr. Bleecker or whoever, who was here 300 years ago and did whatever, that all of that is still there. The past is never past. It's all kind of there, whether you're perceiving it or not. That perception of the sort of, nearly infinite kind of density of information that's packed into any moment that you might be perceiving, if that's the way to put it, is something that Ulysses definitely brought to me.
Yeah, that's our pastimes are our pastimes. Yeah, that's a great line I learned in the Wake, and it's all that's really that ambientness. Well, the first one, though, I want to just clarify, is that what you describes the first thing that shaped your behavior was how to embrace contradiction or embracing contradiction? Is that what
when I was talking about the story A Little Cloud? Or what?
That's the other. Is that in those two words are similar to what you were saying?
Which two words?
Embracing contradiction. You learned that to embrace contradiction.
Well, I mean, that may be a thing, but that wasn't so much what I was trying to say as much as seeing hierarchies as fallacious.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Okay. Because, and then the second one, when you said Bleecker, it reminded me, did you know, being a record collector guy, did you ever go to Bleecker Bob's?
Of course. I went to Bleecker Bob's many times. And I was just talking about this the other day, how Bleecker Bob's is actually, it must have at one time been on Bleecker, but when I was in the Village and it was still there, it was on 3rd Street. And I interacted with Bob himself, but Bleecker Bob's was on 3rd Street. And there's, the 3rd Street Music School is on 11th Street. And there's probably many of them. The 2nd Avenue Deli isn't on 2nd Avenue anymore, et cetera, et cetera.
But, when I met Bleecker Bob several times, he was a good friend with Frank Zappa.
Okay.
And Bleecker Bob would go, "I'm not an asshole, I'm from New York."
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean,
my favorite lines.
Yeah, listen, record store people are supposed to be assholes. New Yorkers are supposed to be assholes.
Right.
And you got a New York record guy.
You're like double.
Yeah.
But I wanted to tell you, just in closing, thank you again, Adam. Really fun. When I asked, I've been able to interview a lot of Joyce people, like who's written books, and like Sam Sloat wrote this book. I don't know how much you cover these. He wrote this book called "How Joyce Wrote Finnegan's Wake." It took him 30 years. And It was funny. It was just a couple months ago. I says, "How did this delve into Joyce shape your behavior?" And he says, "It made me more tolerant."
Interesting. Yeah.
And it's amazing how Joyce affects and shapes our behavior because it's so vast, each person. And it is because people are into it. It's not just, it's sort of like deadheadish, but it's sort of weird, what this thing is with these Joyce readings. So
yeah, it is. And we're definitely still finding out what it is. But yeah, I'll go for that. More tolerant, sure, because seeing and understanding, to some extent equals tolerating.
Yeah.
And the more fully you understand it in a way, the more you can tolerate it ish, maybe. But yeah, I'll go for that.
So Adam, I'll send you some dates. We can book it 2-3 months down the line. I really appreciate your time and energy. I really learned a lot. And thank you so much. Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks a lot. A lot of fun. Really appreciate your time too.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me. Bye.